Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, McKenzie Long, who's here to share with us her new book, This Contested Land, The Storied Past and Uncertain Future of America's National Monuments. So is the future of our national monuments at risk? Well, today's guest is going to dive into just that. So McKenzie Long is a graphic designer and writer who lives in the Sierra Nevada. She's the author of the award-winning essay, The Alphabet Effect, published in Nowhere magazine, and was named the 2019 Terry Tempest Williams Fellow for Land and Justice at Mesa Refuge in Point Reyes. So welcome to the show, McKenzie Long.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. My goodness, what a great read. You have it so well documented. What even had you embark on this journey?
Well, originally, I came to this topic through rock climbing. That was my passion, and I had fallen in love with this particular climbing area in southeastern Utah called Indian Creek. And the climbing there is really challenging. It's really unique, unlike anywhere else. And I became kind of addicted to it. And I would go there every spring and fall. And as I was going there, being in love with the actual sport of climbing, I slowly realized I was also falling in love very much with the place. It's this incredible desert with a lot of saturated colors, some really unique and subtle wildlife. The sun and the quality of the light there is just especially gorgeous. And when I was going there, it felt really remote. It took 2 hours from a big city to get there. There was no cell service at all. There was a lot of free camping, and you could kind of go wherever you wanted. And then in 2016, President Obama created Bears Ears National Monument. And that was included within the boundary. Indian Creek was the climbing area I like. And I remember at the time, climbers were speculating all sorts of things. We're like, well, if it's a monument, maybe they're going to take away all the climbing. And other people would be like, oh, if it's a monument, it's going to protect the climbing. Some people thought if there was no monument, without the monument protection, it was just going to get fracked and the place would be destroyed. And no one really knew what it being a national monument meant. And I didn't even know what a national monument was at that time. And since I love that place so much, I started to look into national monuments to see what they were. And I realized there's hundreds and hundreds of books out there about national parks, and there's very little written about national monuments. And so that sort of got me even more interested because it took me a little more effort to kind of figure it out. So shortly after Obama created it, President Trump took office, and one of the first things he did was issue a review of national monuments that were created from 1996 and onward that were over 100,000 acres. And that included 27 different monuments. And I don't want to credit Trump with inspiring this book, but it did really spark my interest because I was already looking into monuments at that point. And I was like, wow, I already feel like Bears Ears has so many stories and so many interesting things about it. What do all these other 26 monuments have in them that's interesting? And so that was sort of my big jumping off point. And I really started visiting a lot of places, talking to people that really cared about national monuments, and trying to learn the stories within them.
Oh, there's so much there I want to unpack. So I think we'll start with the first question. And you kind of mentioned this or alluded to this about how a lot of people know about national parks, but not so much about national monuments. So what's the difference between the two?
The main difference is the way that they're created. So national parks are created by a vote in Congress. So typically that means there has to be a lot of consensus around the idea of that national park. A national monument, because of the Antiquities Act of 1906, can be created by presidential proclamation, which means there does not have to be a vote or a consensus in any way. I think in reality, usually presidents have a lot of meetings and try to ensure that there is a lot of buy-in from the locals and the public around there. But since there's not a vote, there's always a contingent of people that are pretty upset by it. A lot of times politicians in the states where monuments are created are unhappy because they feel like it's restricting the way that that state can then make money and restricting some of the economic development that can happen there. And sometimes a lot of people that live near the monuments feel very attached to those places, and they can feel like it's the government coming in and telling them what to do with their place, which I totally understand that feeling. So that's the biggest difference between a monument and a park.
So, what's one of the stories you'd like to share with us about a national monument?
Well, I would say that through going and talking to people, I met a lot of really interesting people who were very, very passionate about the places that they were connected to. And one of the most surprising things to me was how often I felt like I agreed with people, even if we had a different stance on monuments. One of my more interesting conversations was with this man named Ken Watts in and I spoke to him in Idaho, and he was a very anti-monument person. And so he lives in Island Park, Idaho, which is right outside of Yellowstone National Park. And there was a monument proposed for that area called Caldera National Monument, which has not become a monument. Um, Partly because of Ken. He launched this big anti-monument campaign, and a lot of the locals around there were persuaded by him and were also very anti-monument. And so I went to go meet him and have lunch because I wanted to understand why he was so against a monument in that area. And I show up a little early because I wanted to make sure I was in the right place and get my thoughts together. And he was already sitting down, had already ordered some coffee. So I'm walking up to the table, and he is sitting there with this big manila folder on the table in front of him. And I noticed that my name is sharpied on the top. And as I walk up, he lifts up the cover of the folder, and there's a photo of me printed from the internet on the top. And he's like, "Oh, you look just like your picture." And I realized he was trying to intimidate me a little bit. But I was like, "Okay, I'm not going to be intimidated." Sat down, placed an order, and we started talking. And we actually had this really great conversation. And there was like a pretty long, convoluted story about the monument proposal and how it had come about and why he thought that it was inappropriate. But his main arguments were that he really loves the place around Island Park. It's full of wildlife and beautiful forests and pristine waterways. I mean, it's essentially like an extension of Yellowstone National Park. And he's like, it's pristine and nice right now. What do we need a monument for? It's already managed by the Forest Service. I just don't think that another layer of governmental regulation is going to be good for it. And he was like, when they create monuments, it often takes 10 years to write a management plan. So you don't actually know what regulations are going to be included in the monument for quite a while. And he's like, why would I trust the government to create a management plan that I agree with? He's like, maybe if they'd let me write the management plan, I'd be all for a monument. And I kind of thought I kind of agree with him. Like, there is a lot of things that the government does that I agree with, and a lot that they do that I don't agree with. And so if it's something as personal as his very special place, I can understand why he felt protective of it and didn't want the government to come in and make a lot of changes.
I think that makes perfect sense, especially given that kind of time frame. And who knows what type of collaborations involved in setting these up.
Yeah. I would say that in practice, it does seem like when a monument is created, it often adds an extra layer of protection and conservation for the area. And it most often does a really good job of better protecting that place, making sure that there's not going to be a lot of mining or logging taking place there. And it often also ends up resulting in some better public access for recreation and things like that. So I wrote a book about monuments. I'm pretty pro monument. But I do think that the management plans and how that they're created can be really tricky, trying to take many people's wishes into consideration.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with McKenzie Long in regards to her new book, This Contested Land: The Storied Past and Uncertain Future of America's National Monuments. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
It's one thing to become attached to your perfect home, but what do you do when that home becomes attached to you? A family in dire need of a fresh start, a mysterious house tied to the past. Buried deep within the foundation of the old Far Hill Manor lies a centuries-old secret. Dark forces or something stronger just waiting to be discovered. Caretaker, a supernatural thriller by breakout authors R.J. Halpert.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, McKenzie Long, who's here to share with us her new book, This Contested Land, The Storied Past and Uncertain Future of America's National Monuments. I think it doesn't take a lot for someone to listen to all the different viewpoints because there are so many people who are so passionate about this topic.
Yeah, people, that was another thing that really drew me to this topic was how much passion is involved. Every single person I spoke to felt very, very strongly about the place we were talking about. And I realized that the connections that people have to land and to place is really, really powerful. I mean, I came to this story because of my own connection to a place that I care about very much. And if you read my book, you'll hear more stories of other people and how they are very connected to certain places for different reasons. And I think that can be one of the most important relationships that people have.
What are some of the other national monuments you've been to that have really impacted you?
I went to 2 different monuments in New Mexico. One of them is in southern New Mexico, which is Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks. And the other one was Rio Grande del Norte National Monument in northern New Mexico. Maybe that those places also really impacted me because I had some really special experiences with people that care about that place, like I said. When I went to Oregon Mountains, there was a man named Angel Pena, and he had worked really hard to advocate for the designation of that monument. And I just cold emailed him out of the blue and asked if he would speak with me. And he just overwhelmed me with generosity. He was like, "Oh, of course, I'd love to meet you. I'm going to show you around to some special places in the monument. I'm going to host an evening at a bar and I'll bring a bunch of people that helped with the monument there so you can speak to all of them. And I'll connect you with some other people that are close to other monuments in the state." And so I really had a special time with him. He brought me out to his heart's place, like the part of the desert that he really cares for a lot. And I felt like that's an extreme gift for him to show me like his very special place. And that's a different type of desert that's just as beautiful as the desert that I fell in love with in Utah, and it was nice to see just another side of this country and another really gorgeous place.
Seems that this is the intersection for a lot of different roads. Is there a cultural aspect to this as well?
Yes, Bears Ears in particular was the first monument that was abdicated for by a lot of indigenous groups. The land that became Bears Ears was land that was very important to multiple different tribes. It was not included in any reservation, so it's considered off reservation land, but it's very, very important to their history, their culture, their present day. Five different tribes that all cared about that place and historically did not get along all joined forces together to come up with a plan for a monument and to push for it. And so when Obama designated it was considered a great triumph. It was the first time that indigenous groups had really pushed for protection of land that they cared for and then gotten it. Plus, Obama did something extra special with the proclamation is he granted them co-management with the government so that the five tribes could have a say in some decision-making agency in what happens to this place that's very important to them. Even though Bears Ears was the first one, it does seem like now it's becoming more and more common for national monuments to be created because of cultural reasons. There's always environmental reasons and beautiful places to protect and wildlife to protect. But the cultural reasons are actually starting to become more and more important. Biden created 5 different monuments since he's been in office, and he's expanded some others. And I believe most of them have some type of cultural importance to different indigenous groups. And so it's nice to see that that's being taken into consideration because that's not historically how parks were created either.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges that our national monuments are facing?
Yeah, I would say most monuments have a lot of tension between environmental conservation and economic development. A lot of monuments are grazing land or places where mining could take place. For instance, Grand Staircase Escalante in Utah, it sits on top of the largest untapped coal field in the US. And so when that monument was created, it was halting plans that were in progress to create a coal mine. So there's a lot of monuments have resources such as that could be developed. And the monument sometimes does allow some type of mining or grazing or resource extraction, but it often limits it to protect the area. But I would say that the biggest issue that most national monuments face is political opposition. When Obama created Bears Ears, then Trump went back and he reduced it by 85%. And at the same time, he reduced Grand Staircase Escalante by 45%. Lawsuits were filed. There was a lot of legal battles happening. Then President Biden took office and he reinstated those monuments, bringing them back to their original boundaries. And then lawsuits were filed against Biden saying he wasn't allowed to do that. So there's a lot of political back and forth, and it doesn't seem like the questions of what type of authority the president has really been answered. So lawsuits can continue to be filed challenging the president's authority. I know that one of the new monuments President Biden has created is right outside the Grand Canyon, and there's a lawsuit about that one. So there's a lot of different things going on challenging when a president makes a decision about a monument. And I know that there's also been several different attempts to eliminate the Antiquities Act as well because of people that are unhappy about the creation of new monuments.
What are some of your viewpoints that you have really kind of stuck with as you have written this book?
I think that I've really stuck to the power of connection to place. And I think that the themes of how people and places interact and how they're so important to each other was kind of the central point of my book. So I feel like I would not be who I am without my experiences with Bears Ears. But I also think Bears Ears is made what it is by all of the people that work really hard to protect it. So it's a reciprocal relationship between the land and people. And I feel like at its core, that's what I was really writing about through the lens of these protected places that tend to be very political.
What role do you feel that public awareness has in all of this?
Well, I think that the more people that are invested in places, the better it can be taken care of. So I think that that's important. I also think public awareness can help because it can inspire people to go and visit new places and have some life-changing experiences. I also think that it's important to recognize some of these less well-known places. Like everyone's heard of Yosemite and Yellowstone and some of those big national parks, but not as many people have heard of Cascade Siskiyou National Monument or Santa Snow National Monument or Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. And these places are just as special and just as unique. And they all have really interesting stories. And I think that the more people know about different places, the more people spread out, and we're not all competing to go into Yosemite, for instance. And I just think that people become aware of how special places are. They tend to care for them more, and they tend to care for the people that care for them more. Even though there's a lot of differing opinions about national monuments, I do think that there is a lot of common ground, even between people that are opposed and people that are for monuments. A lot of times they really just want the place to be the same or protected the way it is. And they just have differing opinions over the ways to do that. And I think that in general, our society could use a little more understanding and trying to find common ground, which I actually think there's a lot of.
What is another very interesting national monument that you've been to?
Well, I wouldn't say I actually went to this monument, but I do have a whole chapter about it. But there's Papahānaumokuākea National Monument. It's outside of Hawaii. It encompasses the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, which are the uninhabited islands. And since it's way far out in the ocean, I wasn't actually able to go there. It's not really open for tourism. It's more of a marine protected area to try and protect the wildlife that lives in the ocean there. And so I did go to Oahu and tried to learn as much about the wildlife that lives out in the water as I could. And I spoke to a marine biologist who has done a lot of work studying animals out in the monument. I find that place to be really interesting because a lot of the land monuments, they are trying to balance conservation, economic development, and also recreation. And people do like to get out on the land. And I do think that that's important, though recreation can have a negative impact on the environment. This marine monument is solely to protect the environment. It's not attempting to bring people there. It's just trying to protect this ocean and the wildlife in the ocean. And that's its sole purpose. And it's also interesting because it's extremely massive. I think it's around 5,000 square miles, which is somewhere around 300 million acres. So it's a really, really large protected area that people don't even really go to.
What are some ways that people can volunteer their time at these different national monuments?
I do think that most national monuments have a Friends of group that raises money for the monument and interfaces with the public. And those groups often will have ways that you can volunteer, ways that you can donate money to help those places, and also ways that you can learn about the monument more. I know that Berryessa Snow Mountain, for instance, the Friends of organization that's associated with it is called Tuliomi, and they have naturalist courses that you can take and things like that, so you can go learn about the plants and animals that are on the monument. If you're really into it, there are many areas that are proposed as national monuments right now that would like to become monuments, and those organizations probably could use a lot of help if you want to advocate for creating new monuments.
Is that what you would recommend for people or communities that want to be involved in maybe really protecting national monuments or being part of the stewardship of it?
Yeah, it might be challenging to get involved with some of the new proposals, but I think if you got involved with a friends group for your favorite monument or a monument nearby where you live, that would be a really wonderful way. Just being a partner with that group will be really aware of all of the issues that the monument's facing, whether politically or environmentally, and will really know the best ways that people could help. So that would be my suggestion.
What would you like readers and our listeners to take away from your book, This Contested Land?
I think one thing I would like people to take away from it is an appreciation of some of the more subtle places in our country. We obviously have a lot of grand, majestic places that are really famous, like the Tetons, which deserve that popularity. But I think there's just as many other fantastic places that just require looking a little bit harder to understand how amazing they are. Some of the monuments I visited in Nevada on their surface just look like sagebrush for miles, but I found that they were really incredible places with a lot of interesting things. And I think that's how most national monuments are. They might not be the most charismatic or flashy, but they all have really interesting stories, really, really special places. And it just takes a little bit of appreciation and a little extra effort to hunt down what the things that are going to interest you are.
McKenzie, you're such a wealth of information. I just love your book. Where can our readers and listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
I have a website, McKenzieLong.com. People can find me on Instagram at McKenzie Kramer Long, Kramer with a C. Those are probably the best places to get in touch with me. And I do love to hear from readers, so definitely send me a message.
Well, McKenzie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, McKenzie. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, This Contested Land, The Storied Past and Uncertain Future of America's National Monuments. This Contested Land is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. Remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.